If I knew what you'd become, I'd have made sure you never took your first breath.
A few short weeks before I was set to marry, my own brother did the unthinkable. He got involved with the woman I was supposed to spend my life with. His pathetic defense? Some recycled tale about an old flame he never got over. But I'm done playing nice. I tracked down the one woman he's idolized his whole life, and the two of us are ready to serve him the kind of revenge he'll never forget. I once believed that a new house and some fresh paint symbolized moving forward. But as I stood alone in that silent living room, the one Isabel and I had picked out together, a strange emptiness crept in. The house was stunning, the kind of milestone that should have celebrated all my hard work in tech project management. Yet beneath the polished surface, a harsh realization stirred. My life had never truly belonged to me. It had always revolved around Derek. Derek, my 34-year-old brother who still mooched off our parents in their basement, was the definition of surface-level charm masking a mess underneath. Once the golden boy of his high school football team, he now clung to his tired Chloe ruined me tale like it was some kind of shield. In our family, it was an unwritten law. No one dared upset Derek. We gathered for dinner to mark the new house. My dad was glowing, clearly proud of everything I'd accomplished. Derek, on the other hand, let out a smug laugh. "Guess the geek finally made it," he joked. I kept my composure, took a slow sip, and pretended not to care, like always. Isabel shot me a glance I couldn't bear. Pity. My mom, true to form, brushed past it all. "Leo, you're the steady one," she told me. But being the steady one didn't mean resilience. It meant biting my tongue, bearing the weight, and making sure nothing ever exploded. For the longest time, I told myself that was what growing up looked like. But the truth was, I was slowly fading into the background. Even so, I kept going. I asked Isabel to marry me beneath a canopy of fairy lights at the little Italian place we both loved. She said yes, and for a fleeting second, it felt genuine. We held our engagement party at my parents' place. The setting was picture perfect, right up until Derek stood up to make a toast. "To my little brother, the planner," he said with a grin. While I was out living, he was sketching his perfect life. And somehow, he got it. Then he raised his glass. "Here's to knowing what you got." People clapped, but I heard the venom beneath it all. Later, he cornered me by the drinks. "She's a keeper," he said, smirking. "Kinda reminds me of Chloe." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Possessive, arrogant, like he needed to remind me of his past, even on my night. That same night, I called Marcus, my closest friend. "Tell me you didn't think that toast was off," he said. "Just Derek being Derek," I muttered. "Yeah, well, rattlesnakes look harmless until they strike," he warned. "He's not just bitter, he's dangerous." I brushed it off. But lying next to Isabel, I couldn't shake it. The danger wasn't coming. It was already here. Life has a twisted sense of humor. It takes the fears you ignore and throws them in your face. 3 weeks before our wedding, the nightmare I thought I'd avoided became my new reality. I had a packed schedule ahead, 2 days in Chicago, finalizing a huge client presentation. The kind of meeting that could shift my entire career. Before sunrise, I kissed Isabel goodbye, already running scenarios in my head about tech specs and delivery timelines. But while I was waiting at my gate at LAX, a crackling voice echoed through the terminal. A powerful storm system had rolled across the Midwest. Every flight to Chicago was suspended indefinitely. Shockingly, my first reaction was relief, genuine, gleeful relief. The trip would be pushed back. I could head home instead. I imagined surprising Isabel, maybe grabbing lunch, sneaking in a day of normalcy before wedding madness resumed. I didn't text her. I wanted to catch her off guard, to see her eyes light up when I walked through the door. The drive home felt like a scene from a romantic comedy. I parked a block away, planning a quiet entrance. Key in the lock, I crept in. The house was still, untouched. I grinned to myself, guessing she'd either be napping upstairs or curled up reading on the couch. Then everything stopped. No dramatic music, no gasps, just silence. Real, heavy silence. As I stood in the living room we'd been painting just days ago. Isabel was on the sofa. Derek was there too. Her head rested in his lap, his fingers tangled through her hair, both half-dressed. His face looked soft, artificially gentle, the kind of fake tenderness you'd see in a soap opera. Time didn't slow down. It simply froze. My brain, the same one wired to juggle projects, timelines, and strategy, just shut off. Not a single thought, just an image I'd never unsee. My briefcase slipped from my hand and cracked against the wood floor, snapping them out of whatever twisted trance they were in. They both jerked upright. Isabel's face crumpled into panic. Derek, unbelievably, looked irritated, like I'd walked in on a private meeting. "Leo!" Isabel whispered, scrambling to adjust her top, voice trembling. I didn't say a word to her. My eyes were locked on my brother, the guy I'd spent a lifetime tiptoeing around, the man our mother trained me to shield. Derek stood, fumbling for control. "It's not what you think," he blurted, the go-to line for every busted affair in history. She was upset. We were talking. What came out of me wasn't a scream or a shout. It was a guttural, bitter laugh, blended with years of buried emotion clawing its way up. "Out," I said. The word cracked through the air, my voice low, shaking. He paused, maybe ready to argue, but something in my expression must have registered. He saw it. The leash was off. He grabbed his shirt, stumbled toward the exit, and disappeared without another word. Then it was just me and Isabel, who was now crying uncontrollably. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she sobbed. "He said you didn't understand him, that you were distant, cold, that your silence was manipulation." And that, right there, was the real stab to the chest. It wasn't only about betrayal, it was the delusion they'd spun together, that I was somehow the villain. That my calm, my boundaries, my sacrifices were ammunition in their twisted fantasy. They'd rewritten the story, and I was the bad guy. I looked around at the house we were supposed to turn into a home. All I could feel was absence, emptiness. The floor beneath everything I thought was solid had vanished. The next 2 days vanished in a blur, mostly whiskey and blank stares. I stayed at Marcus's place, crashing on his couch like a broken man in exile. He didn't try to fix me. He just poured drinks and let silence do the heavy lifting. By the third morning, I was lying there, eyes glued to a crack in the ceiling when Marcus finally broke the quiet. "He didn't just hook up with your fiancée," he said flatly. "That was just the final act in a story he's been crafting your whole life. He's been undermining you bit by bit because watching you succeed eats him alive. So the real question is, Leo, when are you going to stop letting him?" His words landed hard, sharp, and surgical. He wasn't wrong. My pain wasn't just about Isabel. It was the total weight of every compromise I'd made, every insult I swallowed, every moment I kept peace at the cost of myself. What I felt rising wasn't rage. It was something colder, sharper, justified. I sat up, the room shifting slightly. But clarity was setting in. The part of me trained to manage chaos was finally waking back up. I thought about Derek's eternal sob story, his one shield, his excuse for everything. Chloe. I opened my laptop. It didn't take long to find her on LinkedIn. Chloe DuBois, Principal Architect, DuBois Design Group. Her profile showed a sharp-eyed, no-nonsense woman with a professional smile. She lived about 2 hours away. She looked confident, successful, focused. Everything Derek never managed to become. On instinct, I checked her Instagram. It was clean and curated, design work, snapshots of architecture, a few photos of a golden retriever. My heart thudded in my chest. This was reckless, maybe even stupid, but at that point, what did I really have left to lose? I stared at the message window for a long while, fingers hovering just above the keys. What the heck do you even say in a moment like this? Eventually, I just typed the most insane, unfiltered version of the truth I could. "Totally random, and you're absolutely free to ignore this," I began. But my brother Derek just detonated my relationship and derailed my life. And the fuel he used. A 10-year-old pity tale about you. So I figured, any chance you'd be up for delivering some long overdue karma. I sent it. My chest tightened instantly with a cocktail of panic and thrill. I braced for silence or maybe a block. 12 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A reply from Chloe DuBois. "I'm in," she wrote. "That egomaniac. He once tried friending my mom on Facebook after I blocked him everywhere. He's not some heartbroken soul, he's a creep. Tell me what you've got in mind. Let's torch it." In that instant, my suffocating grief was replaced with something far more potent. It was the rush of a fresh mission, a structured teardown. My target? Derek's fantasy life. my ally, the woman he'd mythologized into sainthood. We met for the first time at a generic no-frills coffee shop halfway between our cities. I'd rehearsed my introduction a dozen times, but the second she walked in, my nerves vanished. She had a presence, sharp, self-assured, piercing in the way she observed. She slid into the booth across from me, smirking slightly. "So you're the brother. Sorry for your loss," she said dryly. For the first time in days, I laughed. A real laugh. "And you're the infamous Chloe," I replied. "You're like a ghost story in my family." She chuckled. "All based on 5 awkward minutes at a frat party where he tried to impress me with some nonsense about bench pressing 220 pounds. Yeah, real romantic. Whatever tension had existed, it vanished. We weren't just two strangers plotting revenge. We were survivors of the same tornado, connected by shared damage. We didn't just scheme, we unpacked." She told me how Derek had bombarded her with messages for months after that party, starting with flattery and spiraling into pressure and veiled threats. I opened up about years of emotional sabotage, of living in his shadow and shrinking myself to keep him from exploding. The revenge plan was almost poetic in its precision. My parents were celebrating their 40th anniversary in 3 weeks. Big gathering. Derek would never miss it. That would be the stage. We'd arrive as a couple, not a new fling, but a bonded, comfortable, loving pair. In the days that followed, our performance began. Carefully curated appearances in her city, hand in hand at the farmer's market. She posted a picture on Instagram, 2 wine glasses with the caption, "Good company," tagging my private account. But somewhere between staged glances and strategic proximity, something unexpected began to grow. Our late-night planning calls started turning into rambling conversations about work, failed love lives, favorite films. I found out her golden retriever's name was Gus, and that he snored like a train. She discovered my secret dream of quitting tech to build furniture, and slowly the act began to feel less like an act. It was like the authenticity of our connection made the illusion more believable, and the illusion, in turn, amplified something genuine. One evening, after a long conversation, doubt crept in. "Chloe," I asked, hesitant, "do you ever worry we're becoming him? Playing mind games, manipulating people?" She didn't hesitate for a second. "No," she said firmly. "Derek twists lies to isolate people and play the victim. We're shining light on truth, on the reality of who we are. We're building something he's only ever known how to destroy. Don't confuse the two." And she was right. This wasn't just revenge. This was reconstruction. And she wasn't just part of the plan. She was leading the blueprint. The night of the party arrived, and the atmosphere crackled with tension. My parents' backyard had been transformed into an elegant venue. White tent, live jazz, caterers moving gracefully between tables. It was a social stage filled with the exact people Derek had spent his life performing for. Chloe and I arrived deliberately late. She wore a timeless black dress that turned every head in the place. I placed my hand gently on her lower back, a move that was part signal, part instinct. As we entered, the conversation under the tent dipped. I scanned the crowd and spotted him instantly. Derek stood off to the side, drink in hand, laughing with one of our uncles. As his eyes caught us, his laughter stopped cold. His expression twisted, shock, confusion, and then something darker. Rage. Checkmate in progress. The rest of the evening played out like psychological chess. Every detail meticulously chosen. We mingled, never more than a step or two apart. Chloe would approach while I was chatting with relatives, loop her arms around me from behind, and rest her chin on my shoulder. Every look, every laugh, every casual touch was an arrow aimed directly at him. He saw every second of it. The knowing smiles, shared glances, quiet chuckles, each one a direct hit, precisely where it would hurt the most. As expected, my mom intercepted us near the dessert station. "Leo, sweetheart," she said, her eyes darting nervously between Chloe and me. "I'm just so glad you didn't come alone. It's nice to see you." Moving forward, before I could respond with a polite shrug, Chloe stepped in, flashing a dazzling smile, one that glowed but held no warmth. "He's definitely not alone," she said, giving my hand a squeeze. I consider myself very fortunate. My mother froze, caught completely off guard by this sudden shift in dynamics, but the night's climax came soon after. Derek, emboldened by too much alcohol and a bruised ego, finally made his move. He spotted Chloe standing alone while I fetched her a glass of wine. With forced nonchalance masking his tension, he strode over. "Chloe, wow, it's been ages," he said, trying to appear relaxed. I noticed from across the lawn and started toward them, but it wasn't necessary. She didn't even fully face him. "Derek," she replied, her voice flat and clipped. Undeterred, he leaned in slightly. "I mean, yeah, with my brother and everything, this might be awkward, but..." That's when I arrived, handing Chloe her wine without so much as a glance at him. "Sorry, babe. Took a bit. They were out of the Pinot you like." I slipped an arm around her waist, casually but firmly. Then I finally met Derek's eyes. "My bad, man. Gotta borrow my girlfriend for a dance." We turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone, humiliated in front of our relatives, stripped of whatever power he thought he had left. Later, he cornered me in the hallway outside the bathroom. His face was flushed, eyes wild and glassy. "What the heck is this, Leo?" he spat, voice sharp and bitter. "You think this is funny? Just some sick joke to get even with me?" I stopped and turned to face him. The version of me who might have apologized or tried to smooth things over no longer existed. I met his stare, my voice ice cold. "This? No, Derek. This isn't a joke. This is what it looks like when I stop making myself smaller for you. When I stop letting you walk all over me." I stepped closer. "This is what happens when you confuse silence for submission. Try standing on your own for once." Then I walked off, leaving him stunned in the hallway, his empire quietly collapsing around him. The Prince of Manipulation had just been dethroned in his own domain. And the next day? That was the public reckoning. Chloe posted one elegant photo on her Instagram, a candid from the party, just the two of us laughing, lights softly glowing in the background. Her caption was simple. "Sometimes the best things find you when you're not looking. Subtle, classy, unassailable." We knew Derek wouldn't be able to resist taking the bait. Sure enough, within an hour, he commented from his account, a self-pitying monologue drenched in melodrama. Unbelievable, after all we talked about. "After everything you meant to me. I guess some people will do anything to win. Wow, just wow." He walked right into it. Chloe's reply was clinical brilliance. No emotion, just scalpel-sharp truth, and she made sure to tag him. At Derek the Dreamer. "We met once at a party 10 years ago. You messaged me for half a year until I blocked you. That's not history. That's maltreatment. My relationship with your brother is none of your business. Please respect our privacy and move on." And with that, the myth he'd clung to for a decade crumbled. Publicly and permanently. The comments exploded. Confused emojis gave way to blunt observations from friends, cousins, even a few old teammates. Always thought that story sounded off. "Wow, Derek. Yikes." He didn't respond. He couldn't. The romantic tragedy he sold everyone had just been exposed for what it really was. A fantasy no one believed anymore. I expected to feel satisfied. And for a while, I did. It was clean. Righteous. But then my phone lit up, and I saw a name I hadn't seen in a long time. Isabel. I didn't answer. It rang again. Still, no. On the third call, I sent it straight to voicemail, hand trembling slightly. Seconds later, a text appeared. "Leo, please answer. It's urgent. It's about Derek." A chill ran through me. I called her back. She answered instantly, breath ragged. "Leo, I'm sorry to call, but he came here." Derek, completely unhinged, screaming about you and Chloe. "He said if you two destroyed his life, he'd return the favor." My heart dropped. "What did he do?" "He's been digging through her company website," Isabel continued, her voice cracking. "He pulled names of her biggest clients. He drafted this disgusting email saying she's unstable, a homewrecker, manipulating you for money. He's planning to send it to all of them. He said he's going to destroy her reputation." Everything shifted. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Or family drama. It was a direct attack on Chloe's career, something she'd poured years into building. Derek wasn't spiraling. He was burning bridges, and Chloe's name was now on his list. Right then and there, I knew this had to end tonight. I picked up the phone and called my mother. "I'll be there in an hour," I said, tone sharp and final. "Derek needs to be present. You and Dad, too. We're putting a stop to this tonight." Next, I called Aunt Susan, my mom's younger sister. a seasoned ER nurse who'd always seen through Derek's manipulation but never said much out loud. "Aunt Sue, I could use your help," I said. "There's going to be a family meeting. I need someone in the room who doesn't share my last name and still has a spine." Without missing a beat, she replied, 45 minutes, I'll be there." When I stepped into the living room, it felt like the scene of a long-awaited intervention. My parents sat rigidly on the couch, fear written all over their faces. Derek paced back and forth near the fireplace, seething with that familiar cocktail of wounded pride and self-pity. Aunt Susan sat calmly in an armchair, arms crossed, watching like a surgeon waiting to make the first cut. I wasn't just the youngest son anymore. In that moment, I was the crisis manager come to shut the system down. "What's going on here, Leo?" my dad asked weakly. "Is this some kind of setup?" "No," I replied coolly, placing a slim folder on the coffee table. "This is an audit, and then a verdict." Derek scoffed loudly. "Here we go." Leo and his files again. I didn't respond. I just opened the folder and got to work. "First point," I said, sliding over a set of pages. "Screenshots of you messaging Chloe repeatedly over 6 months after meeting her once. She asked you to stop over and over again." Another sheet. Second, a sworn statement from Liam, your former business partner, describing how you sabotaged his company and pinned a $50K debt on him. My parents stared at the documents, pale and silent. Derek stopped pacing, jaw clenched. "And third," I said, my voice low, "this is the draft of the email you were about to send to Chloe's clients tonight, accusing her of mental instability, lying, manipulation. All because she refused to play along with your delusion." I pushed that final page forward. "This is what he's become, and this is who you've been making excuses for." The room froze. The only sound was my mother choking back tears. Then Derek erupted. "He's twisting this. You're all falling for it. They came after me. They're the ones humiliating me." That's when Aunt Susan finally stood. "Oh, give it a rest, Derek," she snapped, her voice dry and tired. "Humiliated? You've been humiliating this family for over a decade, spinning lies and sitting in your own mess. You're 34, living in a basement, threatening a woman's business because your little ego got bruised." She turned to my parents. "Look at your sons. One of them created something with his life. The other's only skill is burning it all down. Ask yourselves, who are you going to keep handing the matches to?" Then she stood up fully, her voice softer but firm. "What he needs isn't more coddling. It's a therapist." She turned to me, giving a small, solemn nod. "And Leo, you've earned an apology every day for the rest of your life." Derek looked at us, his expression twisted with disbelief. For the first time, the protective wall he had always relied on wasn't there. My parents wouldn't meet his eyes. He let out a guttural yell and stormed upstairs, slamming the basement door with a final bitter punctuation. It was over. The illusion had shattered. The trial was done, and judgment had been passed. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio. There was nothing left to say. I sent Chloe a text with just 3 words. "It's done. Come." When she arrived, she didn't demand a recap. She just walked in, read the look on my face, and wrapped her arms around me. I pressed into her shoulder, feeling everything I'd been holding in finally start to fade. We stood in the entryway like that for a while, saying nothing, just breathing, just stillness. The battle was over. Later, we curled up on my couch with a bottle of whiskey open between us and the city skyline glowing softly through the windows. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a quiet peace that neither of us dared disturb. We didn't talk about my family or the meeting or Derek. Instead, we talked about smaller things, Gus's weird snoring habits, a ridiculous plot twist in a movie she'd watched, a woodworking project I wanted to try building one day. It felt normal, like the mask had dropped and what was left was something real, something untouched by games or grief. Eventually, silence settled between us, the good kind, the easy kind. I looked at her, the soft lamplight shaping the confident lines of her face. "I feel light," I said. The words surprised me, but they were true. It was like I had been carrying invisible weight for years and finally let it go. She smiled gently. "Yeah, I get that." I took a breath and let the next truth come out. "This, what we've built, it stopped being revenge for me a long time ago." She met my gaze without hesitation. "I know," she said. "Same for me." That was it. Simple, honest. The revenge plot, the coordination, the pretending, it had become a framework for something else. Something alive, built from all the late-night talks, the jokes, the trust. I leaned in, and she met me halfway. This kiss wasn't like the ones we rehearsed in public. It wasn't for anyone else. It was quiet, warm, and full of truth. Like stepping through the door of your own home after years of wandering. What began as a calculated revenge scheme had somehow led us to each other, born out of betrayal, yes, but what it became afterward was something altogether different. This wasn't about settling scores anymore. It was about finding safety. In a way neither of us could have expected, we had saved each other. Not by clinging to the wreckage of what was, but by grounding ourselves in what remained after the wrecking ball hit. What emerged was real. The months that followed were full of quiet aftershocks. At first, the silence from my family was deafening, a strange, echoing void where dysfunction used to live. Eventually, word trickled in. Aunt Susan let me know Derek had left the state. My dad had apparently given him two options, therapy and employment, or pack up and leave. For once, Derek chose the latter. There was no apology, no dramatic send-off. He just vanished from my world. And to my surprise, all I felt was the kind of peace that only comes when a burden is lifted. I realized I didn't need an apology. His disappearance was its own kind of closure. The first crack in the wall between me and my parents came through a tentative phone call from my mom. Her voice sounded thinner, almost cautious. She asked if she could take Chloe and me out to lunch. We met at a restaurant that neither side could claim as familiar. My mom looked older than I remembered, lines around her eyes deeper, her movements more fragile. The first 20 minutes were filled with stilted chatter. Then she stopped, breathed in deeply, and looked at me directly. "Leo, I need to say I'm sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For all the times I didn't see what was really happening, or refused to. I thought if I loved Derek enough, he'd change. And in the process, I let you get hurt, repeatedly. I mistook your strength for not needing your mother. That was my failure, and I'm so sorry. I'd stopped hoping for that moment a long time ago. But I reached across the table and took her hand. "We'll work on it," I told her. "Together." A week later, a second apology arrived. One I never saw coming. My dad showed up at my apartment unannounced, holding a bottle of the scotch we both favored. A man of few words, he looked incredibly uneasy. He sat down without a word and stared at the bottle resting on the coffee table. "Your mom told me you two talked," he finally muttered. "I didn't do right by you, Leo. I let you down. I saw what was happening. I just told myself it was your mother's responsibility. I chose the easy road. I was a coward." He looked up then, and for the first time in my life, I saw raw, painful honesty in his eyes. "I should have been the one to shield you, but even without that, you still turned into a man I'm proud of, better than I ever was, and you did it without my help." Those words were ones I'd longed for since I was a kid. "Thanks, Dad," I said, throat tightening. He gave a stiff nod, stood, and awkwardly patted my shoulder. "Still terrible at this stuff. I'll let you get back to whatever you were doing." When he left, I sat alone in the quiet. That bottle of whiskey on the table felt like more than a drink. It was a truce. A step forward. The bridges I once thought torched were slowly being rebuilt. As for Derek, that chapter was finally shut, locked, and buried. For the first time, my family wasn't a source of wounds, but something worth repairing. 6 months after the night it all changed, things had settled into a rhythm that felt like breathing again. Chloe and I were together constantly, our time split between her home and mine, with her golden retriever Gus playing third wheel and professional snorer. What began as a plot now felt like a distant, surreal story, something we'd laugh about someday. The future wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about stability, slow growth, and learning how to exist without chaos. One random Tuesday night, I was in the grocery store debating pasta options when a voice, soft and unsure, spoke my name. "Leo!" I turned. It was Isabel. There was no anger, no sting, no emotion at all. She looked like someone I used to know. Her face was pale, her once vivid energy replaced by something brittle. She looked tired, worn down. "Isabel?" I said evenly. "How have you been?" "I'm hanging in," she replied, nervously adjusting her purse strap. "I know I shouldn't be talking to you, but when I saw you, I just had to say I'm sorry again, truly." I know you are, I replied. And I did. There was no bitterness left, only the cool detachment of closure. She must have taken my calm as permission to keep going. He just got into my head, she continued. Fed me all this stuff about you, said you were cold, manipulative, that you shut people out. He twisted everything until I didn't know what was real anymore. I was a fool. The old version of me would have started second-guessing, would have internalized some of her guilt and wondered if maybe she had a point. But not anymore. I saw her words for what they were. A last attempt to turn betrayal into victimhood. No one forced your hand, Isabel, I said, softly but firmly. We all make choices. Her expression faltered. She had expected forgiveness, or at least a partial absolution. Just then my phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. Stuck in traffic. Grab wine, please. The fancy one. Gus sends tail wags. Without even thinking, a real smile tugged at my face. I looked up at Isabel, at the fading image of a life I narrowly avoided. I should get going, I said. I hope you find your peace. Really? I turned and walked away, heading toward the wine aisle. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That part of my life was finally in the rearview mirror, exactly where it belonged. 1 year after the night that flipped everything upside down, I stood right in the center of a wonderfully chaotic construction zone. The house I once planned to share with Isabel was now completely ours, Chloe's and mine. We had stripped it down to its frame, tearing out the past both literally and symbolically to clear room for what was next. Today, we were covered in dust and smears of dried paint, mid-debate over which blue worked best for the kitchen island. Gus, Chloe's golden retriever, who was now, without question, our golden retriever, was snoring softly in a sunbeam nearby. There was nothing flawless about the moment, but it was perfect in its own way. It felt real. It felt like home. Holding a paintbrush like a sword, Chloe reached out and streaked a line of white across my nose. That's what you get for doubting cerulean dream, she teased, grinning. I laughed and pulled her close, brushing a kiss onto her cheek where another dab of paint sat. I was wrong, I said. It's perfect. Everything with you is. And I meant it. From the start, our connection had been unconventional, a plan born from betrayal and righteous anger. We had begun as partners in a scheme, co-creators of a performance. But once the act ended, something deeper remained. Somewhere along the way, the pretense fell away, and what we'd faked became something profoundly true. That evening, we sat together on the back porch, watching streaks of color stretch across the sky as the sun slipped down. My thoughts wandered across the distance we'd traveled since that night. There was a time I believed that peace came from never challenging anyone, from keeping things smooth at all costs. I shrank myself under my brother's shadow, thinking that was strength. In reality, I had been quietly disappearing, eroding away. But strangely, the destruction, ugly as it was, had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It cracked open the script I'd been following without question, the obedient son, the patient fixer. It forced me to rewrite my role. It demanded that I stop surviving and start creating. It made me look hard at the person I had become and push toward the person I could still be. Revenge may have been the spark, a calculated way to take back power. But the true victory wasn't seeing Derek unravel. The real win was what came after, my parents reaching out, Chloe seeing me, really seeing me, and waking up every morning with the calm assurance that I was finally living my own life, not someone else's version of it. Chloe rested her head on my shoulder, her fingers sliding into mine. What's going on in that head of yours? She asked gently. I turned to her, this amazing, funny, brilliant woman who never saw me as someone to manage, but as someone to walk beside. I thought of the shattered pieces of my old world and the solid, intentional life we were shaping together. Just thinking about the plans, I replied, giving her hand a light squeeze. Just thinking about the blueprint.